Hi, Sam. It's so good to see you. I'm Margo Irvin. I am the acquisitions editor for Jewish Studies here at Stanford University Press. And I'm so happy to be joined by Sam Spinner, who's here to talk about his fabulous new book, Jewish Primitivism. So Sam, could you just tell us what the book is about and what you hope the readers will take away from it?
Absolutely. Thanks, Margo. First of all, Jewish Primitivism is a book that Stanford made an amazing cover for. So I'm lucky for that.
Well, thank you.
Jewish Primitivism is the title of the book, and it's also my name for a whole range of approaches in the first half of the 20th century by European Jewish writers and artists to the big pressing questions of the time. What is Jewish identity? What is Jewish art? What does it mean to be Jewish in the political and cultural landscape of Europe? So by the turn of the 20th century, Europe's colonies had been turned into a resource, of course, for economic exploitation, but also as an object of cultural inquiry and appropriation. European writers and artists engaged in what became called primitivism to turn so-called primitive peoples they regarded as primitive and uncivilized or pre-civilized, and their culture into a model for the critique of modern European culture and society, to turn it into a resource to make European culture and art better or new. My book is about the surprising and in many ways counterintuitive pervasiveness of this intellectual model and this aesthetic project in regards to Central and Eastern European Jews. European Jews turned this idea of primitiveness onto themselves, critiquing European Jewish culture by identifying themselves and other Jews as primitive. So some very, very brief examples that come up across the chapters of my book, just to give a kind of sense of the flavors. In a 1910 speech, so this is the first half of the 20th century, the great Yiddish writer Yud Lamed Peretz said, "Two paths lie before us, one path to Europe where Jewish form will be destroyed, the second path back." By back, he meant ancient history, prehistory, but he also specifically meant Jewish European folklore and traditional religious belief. In 1915, the German Jewish writer Franz Kafka visited a Hasidic gathering, and he said to his friends afterwards, "Looked at precisely, it was something like a savage African tribe." Right, so he's going there to identify with Jews, but not only does he fail to forge identification, but he uses this rhetoric and this discourse of extreme otherness and primitivism. Another short example, the German Jewish poet Else Lasker-Schuler wrote and drew about a society of savage Jews that were her fellow poets and writers. A friend of hers, the Hebrew and Yiddish poet Uri Tzvi Greenberg, took this, translated it into Hebrew, and reimagined this kind of artistic utopia of Lasker-Schuler through the lens of his radical right-wing Zionism, turning it into a vision for the settlement of Palestine. One last sentence on an example, the Yiddish writer Der Nister capitalized on revolutions in aesthetic and visual theory that were prompted by the European reception of African art to create short stories written in Yiddish that reworked literary form on visual principles. And in so doing, he was also able to respond to those pressing questions in the Jewish avant-garde of how do you bridge the gap between universal political values and particular Jewish aesthetic traditions and questions of identity.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that, Sam. And it's been wonderful to begin to see the reception that the book is getting. So while I have you, I'd also just love to hear from you one piece of advice that you have for aspiring authors about the process of writing a book and working with a publisher. What did you find helpful in that process?
Yeah, the most helpful thing, I think, is working with Stanford. You all made it extremely easy. And
that's always good to hear.
Yeah, it really was kind of surprisingly smooth, which I was glad for. I guess one thing that I did that I found helpful, at least in making the process easier for myself, if you have the sort of, if it fits your timeline or you have funding from your institution, to try to do as much copy editing and cleaning up of the manuscript and chasing down permissions before you even submit it for review, just to kind of like get that out of the equation and help things move faster down the line.
Yeah, I think, the version of the manuscript that we are sending out to readers, of course, we understand that you're likely to make further revisions, but really putting the best foot forward, and also I think doing a lot of that kind of legwork is also a favor to your future self. So great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to quickly chat, Sam.
Thank you,
And
Margo.
sorry not to be seeing you at the AJS in person, but yeah, we're so proud of all the books that have come out this year, and I'm glad that we got the chance to chat.
Yeah, same here.
All right, bye-bye.